This is fun. Am I on?
Yep, we're on.
Okay, so thank you for coming today. We have the unenviable position of being the what keeps you between from lunch, right? So we're gonna see if we can keep us on time. My name is Ken Sanford. I play a number of different roles at H2O. Fonda and I have a shared background because prior to this, we were both employees at the SAS Institute. So before I get into that, let me tell you a little bit about how my path to analytics started. I'm trying to get a gauge for the audience. How many R users in the bunch? Primarily R. All right. Now, how many are primarily Python? So that's pretty split. Any MATLABers out there? Handful. All right. Now I need like a really esoteric one. Anybody using something? How many Java people? Hardcore Java. All right. Now we're going to test it out and tell you a little bit about my background. Any Stata people? None? Who's heard of Stata? All right. So I was a Stata user. Why? Well, because I came from a social science background. I was an economics professor. And so if you hear me talk about my past, I usually say I was a reformed academic economist. All right? So I came from an academic setting, learned Stata, and then SAS found me and asked me if I'd come and talk about their algorithms in SAS. And of course, what did I have to do? I had to learn SAS. Any SAS coders out there? All right? Primarily SAS users. Great. So I spent time at SAS, and I had a really interesting job at SAS because you won't believe this, and this is terrible for me saying this, but I spent a lot of my time fighting open source. All right? So what did they do? They brought Ken in, and Ken talked about, oh no, use the closed language, right? Use a particular language. And part of me always felt there was a little dirtiness in that, right? Because the open source world, specifically R and Python space, really allows you access to the newest, latest, greatest stuff. All right? And so eventually I said, well, the unfortunate part about learning either Stata or SAS or to some extent MATLAB is that you're bound by the constraints of what they let you use. All right? To use SAS computation, I had to write SAS language. All right? And what's beautiful about the R and Python space is that I'm not bound by that anymore, specifically with H2O. So really what drew me to H2O, I'm going in and out of my mic here. What drew me to H2O is the fact that you can use our computation, all right, this super powerful engine from R and Python. So if you're in a fragmented shop or if you even have a fragmented background, you have access now to powerful computation that's the same computation regardless of how you're accessing it. All right? So if you're an R person or a Python person, at the end of the day, you're using the same engine and you're producing Java score code. So that's the second thing I want you to take away from how we talk about H2O is that I can access from any source, all right? And my output is this Java object which I can then score with. And I can score outside of my native environment. I'm not forced to score in SAS or Stata or R or Python. All right? So that said, Fonda and I are going to have a little Q&A, and we're going to talk a little bit about strategies for moving from a proprietary model into a more open source model. All right? And let's make this a little interactive. So if you have any questions, just put your hand up, and you know what? We'll see if we can figure it out. That said, H2O has an enterprise support framework, right? And part of that support is this transition. So you have knowledge experts on staff that can help you transition from proprietary, in this case SAS, to a more open model. All right. So with that, Fonda.
So I'll just be really quick because I know I'm hungry too. I've been over there eating candy corn in the corner. I am a SAS programmer. I'm older than probably a lot of people in here. And as Ken said, it was SAS is a closed source program. That's what they've built the company on. And what we were trying to do was to try to get them to kind of embrace open source. And I used to fight open source too. I was in competitive intelligence. So my job was to talk bad about open source or find the little nicks that I could do to convince customers that no, pay our license, pay our support, and we'll help you out. So that's a little bit about my background. But let's just kind of dive into the talk so we can kind of get you out of here. Clicker's not, there it is.
You skipped one.
There we go. So we've already talked a little bit about this. I mean, people are learning R like mad. SaaS still has somewhat of a steady growth, but as you can see from 2014 to 15, it's actually reducing a little bit. Now, my job at SaaS was to kind of talk a little bit about why this is not true. Like, yeah, who they're surveying. They're not surveying everybody that's really representative. But I think now you really have to really look at what people are doing. You look at people in this room. You have R programmers, you have Python programmers, you have SAS programmers, but they're increasing every time we have a H2O event. We're seeing more and more numbers, and you can't dispel that. Okay, Ken?
Yeah, so some of the things that one needs to think about with transitioning from a SaaS, let's call it closed source model, any closed source model into an open source model, is that you can't bite off the whole thing at once, right? You have to think about little pieces. So every analytics process is about extraction, transformation, computation, production, or output, right? And there are different parts of that process that some products do really well, or that you've established very clean guidelines for. Maybe you have a bunch of ETL experts that are very good at taking data out of a database, using some SAS to do some ETL, and then providing you an analytical data structure. I don't think I've ever trademarked that, or I should. Analytical data structure should be Ken's, right? So an analytical data structure that you can then run math on, right? And so that's what H2O does really well. So maybe your strategy needs to be, all right, I'm not going to do a wholesale replacement. I'm going to pick out little pieces. Can I replace one of my products in either my SAS stack or my IBM stack with H2O's compute engine? Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, so when I was preparing for this, I did interview several of our customers trying to figure out, so how did you get started? If you're coming from SaaS, what are the steps? Because it is overwhelming, because my job at SaaS was to convince you not to do that. So of the customers that have actually jumped off the mountain, what actually was it? What could you do? And consistently, it was start small. But you have to do something that a lot of people don't want to do initially. You have to start. I gave a talk a while ago, and it does require some effort. So I think those are the two key points. You have to start, and you have to put in some effort to do that. And the customers that have done that and taken that approach, to start small with just a couple of algorithms, that they want. Don't try to attack the entire analytics lifecycle. That's what I call it. Just start with some small pieces and pace yourself. And they have been very successful. No regrets whatsoever. The learning curve has been a little steep in the beginning because, like I said, I'm a SAS programmer. I was at SAS for 10 years. I like SAS. It's I can read it. I know what I'm doing. And so now I'm learning R. And the syntax was a little tricky for me, but it's the same logic. It's the same thing. So I did have a small curve of being uncomfortable when I installed some of the tools, but it does pass just as everything, and I was able to be very productive very quickly. So here's the analytics lifecycle that we talked about, and as H2O is growing, I know one of the things that I used to tell our customers is SaaS can go across the entire analytics lifecycle. Well, H2O is starting to go across the entire analytics lifecycle too. You just heard Bill talk about Steam, which is in the deployment, where you can actually start deploying some of your models. Model building is an obvious start for anybody in here that is actually using SAS, because we have a lot of models that you can basically substitute in. The models that we use are parallelized. They're distributed, they're very fast, they're efficient. you look at the parameters in one model, you look at parameters in the other model. It's a very easy way. It's a pretty easy mapping. I was able to look at the model and look at the parameters, and I was just, oh, that's it. Oh, that's it. So I was able to map very quickly in actually transferring any models to H2O. Okay. So why open source? Everybody's always talking about that, and I'll answer the question just like I answer to my children, because I said so. But no, that's not, that's not the question. So Ken is going to talk a little bit about why open source and why H2O.
Why? Let's see. Why? What are some of the good reasons to evaluate H2O and evaluate open source? Well, I come from a very proprietary space, and reducing vendor dependency usually is something that one tries to do. I like to use open source. I like the idea of open source because I have the access to the most recently built algorithm, right? And I think that's perhaps one of the more compelling reasons to use open source. Let's talk a little bit about specifically H2O, though, regardless of what this slide says. In H2O, we've tried to build industrial strength machine learning algorithms that run at scale. All right, and so we utilize the open source framework, and we are open source. But in reality, what we're trying to do is make it possible for you to wrap your R or your Python or your Java program with industrial strength machine learning algorithms for supervised and unsupervised learning techniques. And that's what we really excel at. And we run on commodity hardware. We run in parallel. We run in a parallelized distributed fashion. And again, as I mentioned, every single algo provides the Java score code. And what makes this so amazing is that if I'm an R programmer, I produce output that's consumable by my release engineering. If I'm a Python programmer, I produce output which is usable by my release engineering. If I'm in Flow, which is our point-and-click environment, any enterprise miner users in the bunch? All right, or SPSS modeler through point-and-click? All right, again, you're producing here Java score code, which then can be consumed outside of the environment that you wrote it in. And that's incredibly powerful. That's what enables Tony's applications that we saw before, when Tom was talking, when Bill was talking. In all cases, they're actually abstracting from H2O, and you can use the Java code standalone, which is incredibly powerful. All right. Anything else you want to add to this, Fonda?
No, I think that's fine.
Okay. All right. So this last little bit here, Fonda and I were talking about, what are some of the nervous points that she hears from customers. So I thought we'd play a little Q&A here, and I'd ask Fonda, one of the things I hear is that it's difficult to manage the process of moving from closed to open source. How do you respond to your critics?
Yes, it's a migration strategy for sure. I know a lot of customers always, they're very resistant. They've been using SaaS for a very long time, and they're very comfortable with it. And it does, any type of software migration in general does have a little stress. But we're not asking you to convert all your software. I'm not asking you to do that, because I think that anybody who does that is asking to be a little crazy, lose sleep, lose 20 pounds. What we're doing is I'm asking you to convert and look at your stack and figure out, with our help or without, what small piece can I start with? You don't have to change the entire stack. The customers that we deal with, they use some proprietary software. They do. And they use H2O for what it is really good at, which is algorithms. That's where we're starting. We're going to be very good at model deployment very soon. And so that's another place that you can actually try to carve out your space. But I think the answer is start small. Start where it makes sense. for example, in your modeling. That's pretty easy to do. That's a pretty good starting point.
Hey, Fonda, so if I've been a SaaS programmer for years, how do I get started? How do I respond to that?
So I learned SAS when I was in college. I actually went to NC State, so that is where SAS originally started at the university. So I've been using SAS for a long time, and I was resistant. I was. But then I did something that all of us have to do. I bought some books, and I started reading, and I actually, in this presentation toward the end, I have SAS code, and I have R code. And I just kind of went back and forth with the examples. This is what I have in SAS. How do I write this in R? And it was a little bit of a struggle, but we're 2016. We're learners for life. I mean, that's just kind of the way we have to do things. And I bought data management for SAS to open source users, and I bought SAS to converting to R for SPSS and SAS users, and they laughed at me when I bought that book to the H2O office. They laughed. They was like, nobody uses that. I was like, well, I'm learning. So I needed to look at what the structures looked like in SAS, and I needed to convert it in my mind to R.
So Fonda, with that, one of the critiques is, what I have now is working. Why would I ever change?
So we talked a little bit about this. I am not independently wealthy.
Money, right?
Yes.
All right.
If you want to spend the money, then you can do that. It's not for you. But if you want to save money and create things in your own environment, then open source, you have to look at it. You have to.
Yeah. How about so what this really means is support, right?
That's right.
So how about support? Who supports this version of open source?
So if you need a throat to choke, when I first started, and I was I was on a call with some of the customers, and one of the pre-sales person said, we have a throat to choke if you get in trouble. So there's one right there. His name is Arno. And here's one right here. His name is Ken. So we have over there in the corner, there's a bunch of throats to choke. We have a very good, I didn't include myself. But no, there's a lot of support for H2O. I know a lot of you really enjoy the SAS support because I did get that feedback. SAS has a really strong support program, but so do we. Actually, I was very surprised when I came, and there's a blog where we get these messages of customer requests and support, and I just said to myself, why do they respond to all of this? This is crazy. But the support at H2O is unbelievable. So I don't think you would miss a beat as far as that goes.
You want to kick to the next slide since our time is running down here. So the next one's called, what do you need to get started? So let's talk a little bit about the install. If you haven't installed H2O yet, you might want to go ahead and do that. And so you don't need a product key. You don't need anything fancy. Go to our website, hit the download button. The only choice you need to make is whether you want to look at it through Flow, our user interface. Actually, it's not really a choice. I'll show you later. You don't need that. Whether you want to point and click, whether you want to use R, or whether you want to use Python. All right? And so getting started is very quick. It's very easy. All right? If I have an enterprise installation of SAS or something else, and I want to look at a migration strategy, how do I do it, right? Well, in short, I'm a big advocate of a hybrid type environment. All right, as I said before, every analytics process is about extraction, transformation, computation, and then you're doing something with your model. Maybe think about your production flow as Legos, right? Can I take out a Lego? And in this case, where is H2O play really nice? It's that Lego of computation. All right, you saw some of the speed and performance metrics that we have. We're a great option to dive in and have your compute done in parallelized, distributed fashion. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add to that, Fonda?
No, this is just basically the same. You know, the modeling step is, like I said, an obvious step to start with. Just with a migration, you already have the use case. You've already figured out what you want to model. You already have it. You know where the data is. You know what you want to do with the data. You just need to get it into H2O, and you need to start modeling. And like I said, that's kind of, I hesitate to say there's no abracadabra You do have to do the rigor, you do have to do the work to kind of get it into H2O to start the modeling. And I know we're running out of time, but when you download H2O, I don't know if any of you have downloaded other products, proprietary software, but when you download H2O, you are up and running very quickly. So if you go to the bathroom, you will be done. It will be done very quickly. And a lot of times with proprietary software, sometimes is not the case. Takes a bit.
I remember, that's actually a funny story. So I remember back before the days of parallelized distributed algorithms, I remember using it as an excuse to hit the run button and then going to Starbucks to get some coffee before my regression would finish. But unfortunately, that's gone. So good for my caffeine consumption. All right, so we are now right at time, and it is time to go to lunch. So Vinod, do we have anything to say before we break for lunch?
These slides will be available just real quickly. Like I said, I went through the bottom part of this. There's a SAS and H2O code throughout this, so you can feel free to download all the syntax is there of how I started munging code, different things like that, converting. So if you are a SAS person, you have a really good template right there.
All right. So do I say anything? Oh, sure. Let's take one question, and then will you need to say anything, or should I just release them afterwards? Okay, great. Go ahead.
I work in the pharmaceutical industry, and we have the analytics group and we have the IT group.
Mm-hmm.
The analytics group like to use all the software, whereas the IT group comes on open source.
Yes.
Saying that open source is not good.
Yes.
The politics, have you any tips on how to deal with that?
So the question was, how do I deal with politics in an organization where I have a strongly open source community and a strongly closed source proprietary type community?
Open source is more for the analytics group, the IT group that maintains all these things. They don't
Yep.
deal with
Yep. That's a tough question. I think there's lots of ways to answer it. Here's my strategy, and one of the ways that I think H2O plays so nicely with the proprietary. If you think about the traditional analytics process in an organization, you have analytics as the core function of their business, right? The analytics for operation, and then you have like the analytics products that are built. In the analytics for operation, sometimes you have scoring services, scoring already built as part of a SaaS stack. With our base Java, with our POJO, what we call plain old Java object, with our Java object, there are lots of integration points in a proprietary environment, right? So how do you navigate it from a technological perspective? Fortunately, we've created output, which is universally consumable. Internally, how do you advocate for open source? I'm an economist. I think the easiest way to appeal to someone's desire to use or not use open source is the longevity of their firm. If you looked at the diagrams some of the pictures that Fonda showed a few minutes ago, you'll notice that the number of R and Python programmers is exploding while the number of SAS programmers really is shrinking. All right? So if you're looking at the ease of hiring new data scientists, ease of training new data scientists, you almost cannot make a case that the company will be able to sustain itself solely on SAS or some other proprietary language. Yep. So really appeal to the executive and say, look, do you value your business? Yes. All right, if you value your business, how are you going to get enough human capital to persist over time? Where are you going to find those programmers? Go to a college and see if you can find enough SAS programmers to make your business work.
And one of the appeals I think that is important is when you utilize open source, you build your own skill set in-house. So IT really, it's hard to fight with that because when you can grow your business, you growing your own employees in-house, you're not giving that away to a product. So it's hard to me to justify that. I'm saving some funding, I'm developing myself, I'm developing right now, I'm using algorithms and that are available quickly right now. I don't have to wait for another release. I don't have to do that. I don't have to worry about licensing. I don't have to, if I want to customize, I don't have to do that. To me, when you look at things as a whole, it's hard not to see the advantage because it was hard for me to justify that at SAS when customers told me that.
So conceptually, I understand that, but think of downloading RStudio.
Yeah.
I raised this to my IT group. They said, by downloading that, you could create security issues.
Yeah, that's a so
Yes,
the follow-up
that's
was
true.
how do you deal with the fact that things are so easily downloaded? And that's probably too big for this group, but maybe we can talk about it over lunch. So with that, I think it's time to officially break for lunch. You good? Can I let him go?